guys and girls, Poker Thinking here, back with another video. This time we're going to do a slightly different video. I'm talking to the camera, which is something that I haven't done before. And we're going to be talking about the first 3 Flesh and Blood sets. The unlimited ones specifically, and why they're becoming slightly unreachable now for players and collectors. So WTR, Arc and Crew are the first 3 Flesh and Blood sets that released. All 3 of them got first edition or alpha prints, and then they also got unlimited. So WTR and Arcane Rising, the unlimited print runs are very similar, I believe. No numbers have been given out to us, but I believe that they are very similar. With WTR having a slightly higher print run because it's the first set, and they also did these weekend anniversary things where it was drafting unlimited boxes. Stores could get prizes like alpha boxes, for instance. I remember seeing that in one store. And a lot of people were pulling a lot of cards from WTR. A lot of Hearts of Fiandals were being pulled, a lot of Spring Tunics, a lot of the legendaries. So there was a point where WTR Unlimited was just that, it was unlimited. And a lot of people were talking about the fact that Unlimited was for players and first edition or alpha print was for collectors. And there was definitely a divide. And a lot of people weren't happy with the sheer amount that was printed of the first 3 sets in Unlimited. Now, if we flash forward now to 2023, we're in March now, middle of March, we're starting to see the market dry up now. The Fabled Heart of Fiandel is over £450 now, so probably around the same in dollars as well. The Eye of Ophidia is exactly the same. The Art Knight Shard is over 300 now, which makes sense considering they're 1 in 960, and some of them are playable, so it makes sense for these cards that are so hard to pull to be worth a premium. Then of course the next most expensive cards in these sets are the legendaries. So in WTR you've got the Fiandel Spring Tunic. That is now £240 or over $300 in the rainbow foil version. And of course you've got the non-foil version in Crew Unlimited and Crew First Edition. In Unlimited it's about £180 now to £200. And then you've got the white bordered from History Pack 1, which is a reprint set of the first 3 sets. History Pack 1 was basically meant to kind of help give some of these cards into players' hands, but it hasn't really worked in the same way that probably the intended effect was, just because there's 36 packs a box, there's no foils, it's white border, which is great, it makes it absolutely basic, which are these kind of cards that people need for their decks, but it doesn't seem to be very much out there, especially in the UK at least. I don't know what the print numbers are on there. I know that obviously they released History Pack 1 black border in Italian, German, French and Spanish. So we don't know if they upped the print run for those and the History Pack 1 print runs are quite low. I know in the UK specifically there isn't very much out there, which makes sense because they probably bundle us in the same category as Europe. So they figured that, well, the UK is only a small island, it probably doesn't need that much. But even in the US, for instance, talking to US collectors, it doesn't seem to be very much out there at all. And if you look on TCG Player or Card Market, the listings for these legendaries in History Pack 1, there's very few of them. Some of them have got like 3-4 listings on there. So it's not the intended use for them. You know, the idea was that we can release these cheaper copies, all the card prices will go down for those. And maybe even the black border ones will drip a little bit down, but it means that collectors can still keep their foil versions and the players can have their non-foil white border versions. But that's not really how that's kind of panned out. And we've got to a point now where all versions of some of these cards are in the hundreds. The Rainbow Foil Majestics from WTR, for instance, the Enlightened Strike, E-Strike, is £150 to £200 of rainbow foil now. And that is climbing. You've got Command and Conquer from Arcane Rising. That in rainbow foil is hundreds as well. So you've now got rainbow foil Majestics. The pull rates are the same as legendaries, 1 per case, but some of these are now starting to eclipse the value of these legendaries from these sets. Even though the legendaries are very playable as well, you only need 1 per deck. Whereas with these Majestics, most likely you're going to need 3 of them. So if you wanted to foil out your deck and you wanted a playset of Command and Conquer or E-Strike, you're spending multiple hundreds for your deck. And I think that's something that a lot of players are starting to get a little bit angry with. And I can completely understand that. But at the same time as well, you want to keep some value to these cards. So that's why History Pack 1 was a great idea, but I think the way it was done wasn't very good. I think it should have been bigger print runs. I think it should have been 24 packs per box, just because the entry point for it seems a bit high for a lot of people. I still would recommend cracking a box. I would say split a box with a friend if you don't want to pay for a whole box. The pull rates are the same legendary pull rates as the first 2 sets, but you get more packs. So it works out 2.5 legendaries per case, which is a lot better than the average 1 per case before. So if you need a lot of these staples, you can get cases for about £400 now on eBay. A case split between 4 people, that's a box each, 100 each. Or even if you just split a box between a couple of people, you've got a lot of variety there with a lot of cards. You get a lot of Majestics as well. My average was 10 to 12 Majestics per box as well. So you're looking at 1 in every 3 packs has a hit, which a lot of these staples that players need in their decks. And then we talk about Crucible of War. Crucible of War is starting to rise as well. You can still find boxes out there. I know in the UK specifically, case prices have risen. I was buying cases for £200 last year, and that was towards the end of last year. Now they've moved up to about £260, £270 a case. So Crucible of War will be the next set that starts to dwindle out. I believe the print one was a lot larger than Crucible of War Unlimited. I know that they weren't intending to do an unlimited print, and first edition was going to be just first edition because it was a supplemental set. But boxes started getting to 1,500 a box, and they realised that they were far out of reach of players and collectors, so they printed an unlimited run. And I believe that they did do a very large unlimited run, because you can find product of Crucible of War still very readily available, but there is going to come a point within the next 12 months where they're going to be just as hard to find as WTR or Arcane Rising, for instance. So I would say if you need these foil versions from these first 3 sets, I would recommend picking up now, because everything that LSS has shown is they don't reprint rainbow foils. They'll reprint them in non-foil. Multiple cards have been reprinted through the sets. Every set we seem to have a card or 2 reprinted now. The last set we had, I think in Uprising or Dynasty, we had Scar for Scar, and that was reprinted, but that was in a non-foil. And there's been a couple of other cards that have been reprinted in non-foil. So we don't know if they'll ever reprint these cards in rainbow foil. I don't think they will, because I think they'll want to keep that premium for collectors, but I don't know how they're going to solve the issue of the non-foil versions of some of these cards being astronomically priced. History Pack 1 is still in print, so the possibility is that they just print more. That's a very large possibility that I think they personally will do after Outsiders released. The way printing works is their Belgian print is Cardamundi. I'm not sure what the company they use in Japan is, but what I would imagine is they've got to plan print runs 6 months, 3 months in advance to get those printers, because all these card games are fighting for the same printers. It's the same company that prints for most card games, so you can't just go, oh well, can we print some more next week? It has to be planned. So everything you see within the market, everything you see, for instance, Surgical Extraction, that was accidentally printed wrong, and it was actually supposed to be printed as a normal Majestic, but it was shorted printed as a Legendary Majestic instead of Regicide, I believe it was. So they've announced that it's going to be in From Dusk Till Dawn, but that's not until the summer. So again, things are 3 to 6 months in the future. So if you start seeing some of these cards become absolutely unreachable, chances are it's going to take at least 6 months for LSS to sort that out. So I would say buy them when you can, basically. It is a collectors and players market. A lot of the cards are decided by the playability of them. If you look at a lot of the cards that start rising, and people talk about buyouts, for instance, if you actually look at it closely, the cards being bought are cards that people are speccing on. You know, there might be new support for a hero in the next set, so people are like, well, I want to get the cards from the last sets that were good for them. And that's why Monarch, for instance, we start seeing a lot of rises in that. Monarch first edition was very cheap. Boxes were below retail for a very long time because of what happened with the Monarch release. And you started seeing a lot of these cards go up. Phantasmal Footsteps, for instance, is, you know, in the sort of high 200s now. Valiant Dynamo rose, Carrion Husk rose. But there's still some legendaries in that set that aren't very expensive, but if they start announcing levier support, for instance, that the possibility that could happen, some of those other cards could start going up. So it's not buyouts per se, it's new collectors, new players entering the market, people speculating. It's a very healthy market. That's how markets work. People forget that the Flesh and Blood market for 12 months was very dead. There wasn't very massive price spikes at all. You didn't have the price spikes that we've seen recently. It was very consistent, and that was because it was after Monarch. Fab 2.0 has come in. People had left the card game. People were very hesitant with their buy-in and spending. Notice when markets are very consistent, you won't see the price spikes. And that's because people are buying consistently, but not large amounts. They're not buying large amounts of cards. There's not a load of people going, right, let's get this one specific card because it could be good. Because there's no speculation there. But as soon as people start speculating, prices start rising, less becomes on the market, it's more volatile. That's just the way markets happen. And it is a trading card game and a collectible card game, and people buy and sell trade cards. You know, that's all the nature of any card game, really, that's successful. And the fact that LSS has people in their team that are specialists in secondary markets for card games. I know that there's a specialist for the Yu-Gi-Oh, for instance, second-hand card market. So they are understanding the card market a lot more than some card games, for instance. But again, it does take them time to get there. And you've also got another market, for instance, the Japanese market, that isn't being talked about. The roadmap for Japan was announced, 12 months. We're getting Japanese language cards next year. There's going to be a Pro Tour, I believe, and a call-in in Japan later this year. That's a new market that has entered the chat. So there's more players, more collectors, and they're very die-hard about TCGs. So if Flesh and Blood is going to make it over there, the next 12 to 18 months is going to be very important to see, does it get taken over there? Are there enough stores running it? Are there enough stores pushing it? And is it a good mix of players and collectors? I know, for instance, a lot of singles card sellers have started mentioning to me that a lot of the Japanese players and collectors have started buying up cards in large amounts. They're building their decks. They're speculating as well. Cold foil spring tunics from Alpha WTR selling for 5k. You know, we've got extended art tunics. You know, a confirmed sale of that was $6,500 in the PCG 9.5. So, you know, the market is moving. You know, Alpha boxes are starting to rise. Arcane Rising boxes are starting to rise. Crucible of War First Edition starting to rise. Even Monarch's starting to rise. So I would say that instead of getting angry about the volatility of the market, sit back, assess your collection. Are there some cards perhaps that you don't need in your collection that you could sell, that you might not need, to then fund other cards? That's the way you got to look at it. I think a lot of people hoard all their cards and they're very angry at the market because they can't buy cards they specifically need for their decks, but they're sitting there with a spring tunic that they don't ever use and it's now £240 and they're like, well, it might go up. It might do, or it might go down. I firmly believe that the spring tunic will be phased out over time. I think a lot of people called for it to be reprinted again. James White mentioned that it's done now. That card has been reprinted so many times. There's so many different versions of the spring tunic. So they're going to probably phase it out. And a lot of these early cards over time, as power creep happens, as new heroes get support, I know that these generic cards are worth a lot because they are generic and can be used by any hero. But I firmly believe in time, a lot of these cards will lose a lot of their value and power. The collectability value might still stay in there, but a lot of the players will start selling these cards and trading them for cards that they need. So yeah, that's pretty much a brief talk about the first three sets. It's a very different style video than I'm used to. So I hope that this has kind of given some people a little bit insight into what's happening. Well, pretty much every Flesh and Blood YouTuber is making some content on buyouts or the market, for instance. I wanted to do something on the same subject, but slightly different in my kind of style. Because I understand that just showing numbers and stuff doesn't paint the whole picture. And I kind of want to talk about the bigger picture as to why. Because a lot of these YouTubers, not all of them, but some of these YouTubers, they're either coming from a collector standpoint or a player standpoint. And they've only got one view of it. Whereas I've kind of seen it from the bigger picture. I'm I know a lot of players in Flesh and Blood, and I know a lot of collectors in Flesh and Blood as well. And coming from different card games, it's interesting to see how different the Flesh and Blood game is and the market. But one thing is, it's healthy. This is good in markets. It won't continue like this forever. There will get to a point where it steadies again, and it'll be very steady for a while. And then more cards will be speculated. Maybe Tales of Aria stuff will start going up, or maybe Everfest stuff starts going up. We don't know, but that's the beauty of card games and markets, and it happens in every single card game. So thanks all for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe.